Hey everybody, this is Will, and in today's video, we're going to continue our discussion about building a worship set of multiple songs in Ableton Live, and this is part 2 of a 5-part series. Today, we're focused all on transitions, and so we're going to open our set that we built in our previous video, and we're going to talk about transitioning from song 1 to song 2 to song 3, and in addition to that, we're going to talk about adding drone pads to our set, and I'll show you 2 different approaches to do that, and I'll share which one is my particular favorite one. Now, like I mentioned, this is part 2 of a 5-part series. At the end of this series, I'm going to announce something that I've never done publicly before that's going to be completely free that I think you're really going to enjoy. So if you're a worship leader, someone who uses Ableton Live or hopes or wishes to use Ableton Live in a church setting, make sure you stick around and watch every single one of these videos, and then make sure after video 5 you check out that very special announcement that I have coming. Now, to make sure you get all of those, hit the button below to subscribe to my channel. Make sure you hit the bell icon to be notified when we post all of our content, because you're not going to want to miss that. Now, like I mentioned in today's video, we're going to be focusing on transitions. When it comes to transitions in Ableton Live, there's really 4 types of transitions. And in particular, when we're talking about doing this in a worship set, 4 types of transitions I want to talk about. Our first transition is just the default one, which is we get to the end of a song, and at the end of our song, we just play into our next song. And at the end of that song, we play into our next one. That's the default state of arrangement view. That's one of the reasons I think arrangement view is the best view to use for tracks. But in particular, when you're using tracks in a worship context, I think it's essential to use arrangement view because we can really focus on our transitions. So we're going to be talking about that today, our first of our 4 transitions. And we're going to, again, enhance that with some crossfades. We'll enhance that with adding some drone pads. But then in addition to that, we can program Ableton Live to stop. So as opposed to going from song 1 and flowing into song 2, we could set up Ableton Live to, at the end of a song, stop. And then in addition to that, transition type 3, we could have it stop and automatically select our next song. And then our 4th type of transition we can really deal with and talk about in Ableton Live is at the end of our song, we can keep our click going, and we could have what I call a flow or a looping transition. And so that's just the idea of we get to the end of the song, we keep our click going, maybe we have a drone pad going as well too, and we just kind of stay in that moment, and then we can jump back into our song and navigate through. Now, today's video, we're just going to focus on that first transition type where we just go from song 1 to song 2. Next week, we'll talk about setting up and programming Ableton Live to stop, and then to stop and select our next song. And then our final video, that's where we're going to talk about that looping or that flow transition. So let's dive into today and let's talk about just kind of the natural state of this. So I think the best place for us to start is I'm just going to press play in Ableton Live, and we're just going to listen to the end of song 1 into song 2. Okay, so let's start here. I'll press play and we'll just listen to the end of this and see what our transition is. Okay, so our stems are going to naturally start to fade out here. We've got a little bit of a gap, a little bit of time with nothing going on. And then song 2 is going to start. Got a little bit of click. That song starts to fade in. 2, 3, 4. And then we're right into the intro. Okay. So, at the start, that may be a transition that works for you. We've got a little bit of space in there. And as you think about that, as your band's kind of playing, maybe their drummer's trash canning out on the cymbals. And that may be an opportunity for the folks in the congregation to clap if you're a church that claps in between songs. So the default state of that may just be fine the way it is, right? It's possible that just having space in between your song is enough for you. And if so, then great. We're ready to go. We've got a measure of space. Let's say we wanted to add a little more space though. What would we do there? So I could click right here, and I'm just clicking in Live's grid in kind of the main playback area here. And I'm going to do the keyboard shortcut Command I. If I'm on a PC, it'd be Control I. On a Mac, it's Command I. And this is going to insert silence or insert space. So what I do is I click at the top here, and I'm going to type 1. And that basically means how many measures do I want? I want 1 measure. And so what I've done here is I've added a measure of space in addition to this. So 1 extra measure. So again, if I listen to this and I thought, okay, I want these to fade out, I want 2 measures of blank space, then I'll go into song 2. Then that's how I would do that. And with that sort of transition, if that's what you're interested in, then we're set there. Now, if you're like me though, I'm listening to that and I'm going, there's a little more space than I would want. I still want my songs to, song 1 to end, song 2 to start. Let's clean that up and let's make that a little tighter. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to the end of my song. So this is actually the ending. I'll add a locator here. We'll call this end. just so I know where that is. We've got about a 3 measure fade out. Here's what I'm going to do to start with. I'm going to select this amount of space right here, and then I'm going to use what's called our delete time command. So I'm going to do Command Shift Delete. And that's going to delete that time. And you could see what it did there is it basically brought song 1, song 2, and nudged them up together like that, right? And the delete time command is super important. A couple other commands you should know if you're going to be editing your arrangement in live. And I'll link, I'm just going to make a note here. I've got a video on some edit arrangement and edit time commands that I think are super important if you're working in arrangement view. It's essential that you know these so you can quickly navigate your Ableton set. But if you go up to the edit menu, you'll find all these commands. They're right here: cut time, paste time, delete time, and duplicate time. And essentially they're your normal commands. Like the cut time is, instead of just Command X, is Shift Command X. So essentially if you add a shift to your normal command, Command X, add Shift Command X, then you're going to cut time as opposed to just cutting a clip. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If I go back out of here, if I were to select these clips here and hit delete, I deleted the clips, but my songs are still kind of where they were. If instead of that, if I selected this amount of space and I did Command Shift Delete, then I actually deleted time. Okay, so that's my first thing. Now let's listen to that transition. I already know it's not going to sound great. It's not going to be great because song 1, I just chopped off the end of it and we're starting song 2. But let's listen just so we can compare this to everything. All right, so here it drops out automatically. Intro. That's not great, but it's a start. We've reduced the amount of time between those songs. Now let's bring those stems back and let's actually add a crossfade so that the end of song 1 fades out, the beginning of song 2 fades in. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna unfold this track. I'm gonna select all of my stems for my first song here, and I'm gonna hold Shift to select the last one here. Put my mouse towards the end of these stems. I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm going to drag them out the entire length of the song. Okay. Let's leave them just the way they are right now. We haven't added a crossfade, but let's bring them back in and let's listen to that. Intro, 2, 3, 4. Now, the truth is, when you're listening to these songs, it's very possible that you actually don't need to apply a fade to that because that didn't sound bad. If we're honest, if you listen to that, it didn't sound bad because those stems kind of naturally fade out and the song 2 kind of naturally fades in. And so it may be that you're perfectly fine just the way you are. You may listen to that and go, you know what? I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with that kind of naturally dying out in the start of song 2 starting. These are in different keys though. If we check this out, song 1 is in E flat. Song 2, I think, is in D flat. Let's see. Yep, D flat. So what I'm going to at least do is make it to where I want this song to actually end by the time song 2 starts. Okay. If you're familiar with the app Playback, when I worked at MultiTracks.com and we added in the transitions feature, that was a kind of realization I had when I was designing those transition types. Is I was in my office one day and I'm going, okay, let's do a crossfade. And I realized, well, most of our songs kind of naturally die out and crossfade naturally. So I don't want to apply a fade when I don't need a fade. But what we did is I kind of presented this idea to the developers and they designed this way in which song 1 would end before song 2's intro started. So you'd have a really nice smooth transition. Well, what's really nice about Ableton Live is we have full control over when we want that transition to happen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back into Living Hope here. And I just want to chop off this little ending bit here. I don't want this to actually be here. So I'm going to select that and hit delete. Let me let you hear that. We'll kind of go step by step. Let's listen to that and then we'll go from there. So here comes our fade in. Now, again, that's not awful. It's pretty clean, but I think what I want to do, I still want to apply a crossfade. I want to actually get in there and tell live when I want song 1 to fade out and song 2 to fade in. So let's actually get into the point of applying our crossfade now. So I'm going to leave my track unfolded. So the way I'm unfolding this is I'm unfolding all my stems. I'm going to go to my last stem here and I'm going to unfold that so I could just see the content that we have here. Now, if I went to something like keys, well, let's see if we can find something that's a little bigger. Guitar. Yeah, it's kind of similar waveform. So we kind of end there and fade out over the span of 2 measures. What I'm going to do is go a little to the right of where this clip ends here. And I'm going to click and just drag up so I hit all of these stems. And I'm going to stop right here at the top. Now I'm going to use our create fade command, which on Mac is Command Option F. and I'm going to automatically create a fade for this. So what I did is I basically at the end of the song said, okay, I want these stems to fade out so that by the time we get here, they are completely out. Now I could do that in reverse with Battle Belongs. I'm going to unfold this. I'm going to do the same thing again, but in reverse. I'll expand this bottom one so I could see this. Go a little to the left of this time. I'm going to drag up. Okay. And we'll do Command Option F. So we're applying our fade there. And we're going to do this so that this fades in. And by the time our intro starts, we're at full volume. We're right where our volume needs to be. One thing I'll point out about this crossfade that's super nice and applying your fade this way is if I hit tab and go over to session view, you see we have a master volume for our song. For each of these songs, so it's separate. What's really great is if I pull the volume of my second song here, Battle Belongs, down, then my fade still applies. So my fade is basically a mathematical formula that says, here's the amount of volume we have available to us based on where we move our track volume, a little bit, we have a lot, and we're going to fade from this to whatever our max point is. So if I change that fader, I'm not losing my fade. And if you've done this in previous versions of Live, you know how incredibly nice that is, that I could still apply my fade and I can still adjust the levels of my song independently from that, which is great. So let's go back over here. Let's listen to that now. So we've applied a crossfade so that our fade starts here. By the time we get to our intro, it should be out. Our fade in is going to start here. And by the time we get to our intro, it'll be at maximum volume. So let's press play and let's take a listen.
Intro, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how you feel. To me, that sounds the cleanest of any of our transitions we've done so far. So song 1 ends, song 2 starts. That feels right to me. Now, one tip I'm going to share when it comes to creating transitions in Live is I think it's super important that you think about the transition, and let's talk in the context of a worship set here, because that's what we're dealing with. It's important to think in the context of the congregation. To us, I just designed this transition listening to click, but I like to think about it from the congregation's perspective. And this is the trick I do. I turn my click off, turn my guide off so I don't hear anything. And then I play back that transition and just listen. So without our click on, this is what that sounds like.
Intro, 2, 3, 4.
So that's a very useful tool for me, because what I find sometimes is in our mind, we think our transition is just right. But what we're not thinking about is our song is ending, our click has died out, our second song is starting. But for the congregation, this is not 2 measures of music. This is 2 measures of essentially silence. Yes, we're fading in here. We're fading on our song. But what a lot of people do is they essentially build their transition to where it looks something like this. Let me add some measures back here. And let's delete this just for a second, and then I'll go back and do this. What most of us do is we do something like this. We'll have our song, we'll have it to where this song fades out. And we think of this right here as being the end of our song, right? So we typically do something like this. Again, let's do a 2-measure fade. And the problem with this is let's listen to it from the congregation's perspective. So here's our song ending. We turn click off. So again, we're listening from the congregation's perspective. It's a nice fade out. That's great. But then we go to complete silence, and then we start to fade in. Now, it's very possible that in that space, again, you're at a church where people are going to clap. And so maybe that transition works really well for you. But what I have found is again, typically the type of transition I like is something like this, to where I'm basically overlapping these songs and I'm applying a crossfade. So we fade out here and fade in here in enough time. Okay. Let's look at the transition between song 2 and song 3. I think I'm going to do a kind of a similar thing here. And song 3, if I remember, starts with a little guitar kind of riff thing and drums. And so I'm just going to by default do this. And let's start with this. Let's hear what we have. Oh yeah, this actually ends really, really soon. So I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to go kind of crazy and trim this. And this is one thing I really highly encourage worship leaders to be a good music director. And by that, I mean, serve your team really well through music, serve your band really well through music, serve the congregation really well through music. Don't just purchase a multi-track and think, oh, the end of this song has a 16 measure outro. And so we've got to be stuck with that. And we've got to wait for that outro to end to get to our next song. No, trim this to make it work for you. If we look at this outro, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, basically 4 measures of an outro. That's in most situations, not all, but in most situations, that's going to be way too long to then get us into song 3. So I'm going to make this completely my own. Again, another reason why I think Ableton Live is the best tool for worship leaders that want to have complete control and total control over transitions in particular, and complete and total control over planning their worship set. And this is why I view Ableton Live as a tool for leading worship, not just a software. It's an instrument and it's a tool for leading worship. And we're using it as a tool for leading worship by really focusing on, we build our set really quickly. Well, now we can focus on being a worship leader and being a worship pastor to our team and our congregation and getting these transition moments just right. So now for this, I'm going to just go kind of crazy here. We're going to leave about a measure of this, and we're going to see that may be too much and maybe not enough. We'll see. So I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to drag these back out. And I'm moving kind of quickly because we did this before, but I think you guys get it. And we're going to drag it till we get to our intro there. Okay. We'll do the same thing. I don't know exactly what type of content's happening at the end of the song. It really don't matter, but I'm going to just by default apply my fade there. I do know this song starts just right in with guitar, so I don't need to fade that particular song in. But let's listen to that and let's see what we get with this song.
1, 2.
Oh, and let's turn our click back on. All right. Here we go.
3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Intro. 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So this one's kind of weird. I feel like our stems in before our song starts, and that's just kind of naturally how our song is programmed. So I'm actually going to trim these a little more, and then I'm just going to end up cutting off like the last little bit of this. Let me show you what I would do. For you, that may work perfectly fine, but I'm going to do this and engineer this in a way that for the band, it may feel a little awkward, but I think for the congregation, it's not going to feel awkward because song 3 in this case doesn't start with a fade in. So there's not really anything happening there. And again, if we add drone pads in, maybe this is fine, but I'm going to set it up so that song 3, let me just show you, you'll get what I'm saying when I say this. So I'm going to actually go a step further and I'm going to trim this ending like this. Okay. So I'm going to actually get rid of our last little ending bit there. And then I'm going to drag everything back out. So let's delete this. Let's go to these clips here and we're going to drag this out and we're going to drag it all the way up until our intro. And then we'll reapply our fade here. And the reason I'm doing this again is this song 3 just starts really abruptly. So I'm going to give it a little less space. I want to get into this a little quicker. So let's try this out now. Again, it's going to feel a little odd to the band. It's going to feel odd listening with click. Actually, let's turn click off to start so that we just experience it for the first time like the congregation would. Then we'll bring the click in and you'll hear why it maybe sounds a little odd. So let's turn click off. We'll turn off our guide here. Let's listen back. Okay. Now, that's not bad. I think I have more stems left to go here. Yeah, I do. So I'm going to actually extend that fade till about here. And let's try that because it gets a little quiet. Again, we could fill out that space with a drone pad, but let's see how this works. And that drum fill at the end of that song is just ridiculous. That's over the top, but it's fun. Yeah. Okay. I like that. That works for me. Again, we're going from D flat to F, but I think that little transition is going to be perfectly fine. We'll be covered up. And in particular, we're going to cover that up with a drone pad here in a moment. But let me show you one other additional thing. You may listen to this and let's press play again. You may listen to this and hear like, okay, there's that little organ thing that's like super high pitched. I think it's likely the organ. We'll find it here. Let's fade that out a little sooner. So what I could do is unfold this and let's go see if we can find, I'm just guessing it's organ. It may be pad, maybe guitar or something. But I'm going to go and I'm actually going to shorten the fade on this so it's out a little sooner. Let's listen to that now. Yeah, I think that's it. right? So you could see, we could actually go in and edit these individual songs. Maybe the drums, granted the drums are not too long because they basically end there, but we could have them fade out a little sooner. You're probably not going to have full drums unmuted in your set. Maybe electric's a little wild. Whatever we could do, we can adjust the end times for this particular song to be a little different. What I like about this, to me, transitions are per set, right? A transition is set dependent. It's not this song doesn't always end this particular way, unless of course, it's a song with like a 16 measure outro and you're like, we're never going to do a 16 measure outro. So I may just, drag the song in, leave the normal default outro. And then, maybe for another set, I want to keep the full outro. But in this particular context, I'm listening to that and I'm going, yeah, let's take that organ thing out because it's just cutting through the mix way too much. And let's have it fade out earlier than the rest of stuff. So you can really see, again, this is the kind of customization that you'll never have in an app like Playback or Prime. And again, I always mention that as soon as Loop Community or MultiTracks adds that much kind of detail and ability to adjust transitions into those apps, then they failed. Like they should never have that level of customization. But I love that within Ableton Live, I have that flexibility and ability to do that. Now, so that's really a look at our first transition type, just ending a song, automatically flowing into our next one. I really like that as a transition type because it allows us to get this just right. It allows us to add a crossfade. It allows us to fade individual parts at different times. And I just feel really good about that. I think most of the time with that type of precision and with that type of, I'm going to rhyme here, decision making, precision and decision, we can get this just right to where it's very possible you may not need a drone pad. I think a lot of times worship leaders, pardon me for my old man soapbox for a moment, a lot of times I feel like worship leaders default to drone pads because they're not intentional with transitions. I'll say that again. And hopefully you're going to get frustrated. You're going to mute. You're going to stop this video because you're mad at me. But I think it's true. I think a lot of times worship leaders default to drone pads because they're not intentional with transitions. They're not sure how to change from this key to that key. And so the default is just in a song, play a pad, give a nod to the keyboard player. They start the next pad. We wait a second. We nod to the drummer. The drummer starts a click for that. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not being intentional with transitions. I personally feel, and I was a musician and a music director and a band director long before I was ever into Ableton Live. And so I always think of the music first. I think of the Ableton stuff secondary. But again, as I mentioned, I think of Ableton as an instrument. So for me, this kind of focus and attention on transitions is the kind of thing I'm interested in, as opposed to just song one, pad, wait a little bit, click start, song two. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think spend some time focusing on transitions like this. Now, that being said, drone pads can be a very, very useful utility and a very useful tool, particularly for moments like out of song one to song two, we're going from E flat to D flat, dropping down a whole step there. It may be very possible, or a drone pad is a really good utility to help you make that key transition. And again, we're going to use drone pad as a tool, as a resource, not as a crutch, right? We're not going to use it just because we don't know how to make the transition. We're going to say we actually intentionally want to make this transition. So here's what I'm going to do in the case of drone pad. Let me just show you how to use it. And then we'll make some tweaks to the transition we made between song 1 and 2. And then I ultimately want to show you my favorite way to use drone pads in a worship context. So I'm going to go over to my browser here, and I'm going to use this pad collection here called From Studio to Stage Free Pads. To make this easier for you, if you have audio pads that you've already created or you've bought or purchased from somewhere, then please use those. But if you're looking for some great pads that are going to work in any type of worship set that are just really simple, straightforward, then head to FromStudioStage.com/pads. You can download this pad collection for free. And all you have to do is just add your email into there and your name, and you can download this pad collection for free. That's what I'm going to work with in this video. And then I'll show you an additional resource that we could use in just a moment. But let's start with using these free pad downloads that I have. So first thing I'm going to do is look at the key of this. This is E flat. I'm going to go over here to my browser and I'm looking for the key of E flat. I created these and generated these to follow kind of Live's naming convention, which is using sharps instead of flats. So it's time to put my music degree to work here and say, okay, E flat would be D sharp. There's my enharmonic equivalent. So what I'm going to do is drop this into Live's timeline here. I want to nudge this all the way to the beginning though. So we're going to go all the way to the beginning. I'm going to put this in a separate track at the bottom. Okay. So drag this all the way over. Now these files, again, free download. They're MP3 files. They're going to run for 20 minutes and they have a fade in so you can use them very easily. But this song is not 20 minutes long. So what I'm going to do just to make my life a little easier, I'm going to go to the intro here. I'm going to click right here and do Command D, and that's going to split this clip. Command D would be Control E if you're on a PC. And I'm just going to click to delete all my other files. Okay. So now there's my key of E flat. Now let's go to D flat. Okay. Same thing here. D, I need to go to D flat. That's going to be C sharp. So I'm going to take the key of C sharp and I want this to start at the start of our song. So I'm going to drop this in. I'm going to put it in the same track as my first file there and just drop it right on top of that. Okay. So these are both loaded in to that song. Let's go ahead and do song 3. Again, we'll go into our intro, which starts here. So we'll split this. What's our split command? Command D. Let's do our final key here, which is the key of F. So we'll grab this and then I'm going to drag this to start. I actually want this to start in my intro. So we'll start this a little sooner there. Okay. And then finally, I'm going to rename this track and call this pads. Okay. Now, let's listen to this transition first. And then I want to talk about it because I already know I'm going to make some changes to this. You maybe even see this, like you're maybe even looking at the waveform and going, Will, this is kind of weird. Let's play it. Then we'll talk about why it's weird. And then we'll talk about how to fix it. So I'm going to go right here to the end of our song and let's listen to it. Okay, so obviously if you're looking at this, you could probably tell what's happening here. We have our pad running at full volume, and then the start of our second pad is actually starting with a fade in. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of that fade in. Here's what I love so much about Ableton Live. In order to do that, I'm going to put my mouse towards the beginning of this clip. We get that little bracket that we've seen a few times before, and I'm just going to click and drag until my pad makes it up to full volume. And I think that's about 2 measures long, if I remember correctly. And now I'm going to drag this over here. Okay. So now what I have is I have this pad at full volume. I have this pad at full volume. Let's listen to that. We'll go about a measure back. Okay. So that obviously sounds pretty funny, and it sounds funny because we diamond on this part right here in the key of E flat, and suddenly we start a pad in D flat. Now we don't want that. So here's how I am going to fix this. I've got these 2 pads back to back in the same track, these 2 clips. And what I want to do is I want to apply a fade, kind of similar to what we did with our tracks. I want to apply a fade so that it takes us a little bit to get from song 1 to song 2. And I'm going to start doing this right here. I think I'm going to make this a little longer and I may actually shift this, but I'm going to go on either side of this. Actually, you know what? I lied. I'm going to go to right about here. I want this to run that entire length. Okay. And then I want it to slowly transition over to our new key so that by the time we hit our intro, we're in our new key. Now with making that change here, I'm going to select 2 beats on this side and 2 beats on this side. And the way I'm seeing 2 beats is I see 95, 95.2, that's beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. Now I'm going to use that same fade command that we did before, which again, see if you remember, Command Option F. Okay. And I'm going to create a crossfade. So what I'm essentially doing is in this section here, I'm fading from D sharp to C sharp. All right. I'm fading from E flat to D flat. So now let's play that. And what I'm doing is I'm essentially having the transition happen here as opposed to happen in this moment exactly. Okay. And if I wanted to, I could go in, I could disable automation mode and we get some brackets where we can drag this out. We could have it last longer, but let's just have it go for about a measure. I think that may be too short, but we'll try it and we'll see. So let's listen back now. Yeah, it's not bad. I think it's a little short. I do think in a perfect world, and we'll do this between song 2 and song 3, I might add a little bit more time there. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to leave this and I'm going to move this crossfade handle here and see if I can adjust it and get it to take a little longer to transition. And I think we'll be good there. So again, the way I did this is I made sure I disabled automation mode. So I click up here to disable automation mode. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take our handle here, our crossfade handle, and I'm going to drag this out to where our transition kind of happens really over the span of 2 measures. I could go a little further here this way. Let's try that. I don't think that's going to hurt anything. Means we're bringing in D flat a little sooner, but I think that's fine. So let's listen to this now. Okay. That works for me. Again, I think I would leave a little bit more time. You'll see maybe a little better example of this in between song 2 and song 3. But let's try this. Let's see kind of what this looks like between 2 and 3. But you could see how much customization we have over our drone pad when we're using drone pads in this way. In particular, using the free from Studio to Stage pads is going to give you this much flexibility and customization over your drone pad. So let's go between transition between song 2 and song 3. And let's just see what we have going on here. So I've got this ending at my outro, which obviously I do not want. Let me listen to our outro. I think this is yeah, that's right, the way we trimmed this up. Okay, it's going to end there. And then it's going to slowly fade in. So here's what I'm going to do. I know just by default, I want to go ahead and add an extra measure instead of what we had before. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to do Command I, and we're going to insert 1 measure. Okay. Now, just to save myself some time, to make sure that I don't have to redo all my fades, I'm going to take these clips and I'm just going to nudge these over. Okay, so we'll make sure we grab all of them. Again, the level of precision I can get over transitions is pretty nuts, and that's why I think Ableton Live is the best tool for this sort of work. Okay, I think that's good. I do need to bring my tempo track over, so let's bring that over so that fills out that entire space there. And then what I want to do a similar thing to what we did before here. I'm going to cut off that intro, and I'm going to have this start. When does our song start? Our song starts right here. Okay. I want that to start in that space. Okay. In that transition. And so I'm going to do this. I want to take a little bit of time. I think this is going to work. I think this is going to be fine because this is going to be fading out, and then we're actually going to have our transition kind of start here. Let's try this over the span of a measure. And let's see if we like that. So again, the way I'm doing this is I'm going a measure to the left of our transition, which is right here. Okay. And then a measure to the right of that. And I'm going to do Command Option F. There's our crossfade. And let's listen to that. Let's see what that sounds like for us. And then that's when, again, let's actually turn our click on so we can hear this. I think that'll be easier to hear. I think that works for me. Let's listen to it one more time. I'm going to listen to it with the click on. It's kind of hard to tell when the song ends and when the song starts without the click. I think that's going to work. I could maybe even add more space if I wanted. I think I may have the pad for the key of F coming in a little too soon. And if so, we can adjust that. But let's listen and let's see what we think with the click on.
1, 2, 3, 4. Intro. 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I think that's what I want to do. So I'm going to actually drag this out to where we go a little further, and it takes a little longer to get to the key of F. So we're going to extend this to where our fade is happening more like that. And let's see. I mean, this may be perfect the way it is. Let's extend it. Let's do that. Maybe too far, but we'll see. Let's try that out and see what we think.
1, 2, 3, 4. Intro. 2, 3, 4.
Now, to me, that feels a little weird, but again, when I think about it from the congregation's perspective and not hearing click and guide, they're essentially not going to hear music, and they're just hearing drone pad for really about 3 measures. And so I think that's going to work from their perspective. Let me play it back one more time with click and guide off. And again, this is something I do often as I'm building transitions. Turn your click and guide off and just focus on what the congregation is hearing. Again, it's a great opportunity to be a worship pastor to them, to be a great music director, to serve them well, but really thinking through and focusing on these details. Let's try that now. Yeah, I think that works for me. I honestly, I could even go, because that's kind of a weird key change from D flat to F. I could even go maybe a little longer. I could add maybe another measure there in that space. But again, listening to it from the congregation's perspective, I think feel a little better about that. Particularly when you're using drone pads for a key transition, going from one key to the next. I do think making your crossfade over the span of a measure is probably going to be too quick. So maybe expand that to be 2 measures or even longer. And again, make that kind of space and time in between. It might be the thing that kind of makes that work for you. You really take the time in between the songs to transition key and then get into your next song. So I want to show you, this is a great way to use pads. It's a great way to do transitions. Again, if you haven't yet, download, head from studiotostage.com/pads to download the pad collection for free. But I want to show you my preferred method and way to use drone pads, and that's to use something called Pad Player. Pad Player is a instrument for Ableton Live that allows you to drag in MIDI clips into your set and get really ultimate freedom and flexibility with drone pads. And here's what's really cool about, in particular, using Pad Player is it's going to allow you to create infinitely looping pads. So what I mean by that is it's a pad that's going to go on forever. It's never going to stop unless you tell it to stop or want it to stop. And then it's dynamic and it's super flexible. Let me show you exactly what I mean by this. It's really, really expressive. It allows you to go from something that's just a pre-recorded piece of audio like the pads we have here to something that you can really play like an instrument. So I'm going to access the Pad Player kind of similar to what we did here. We're going to expand our live set. We're going to click the arrow to the left of our live set here to expand it, and then the arrow to the left of our actual Pad Player track. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just drop this into my set. I'm going to drop it below our pads track here. Okay, so that's going to load in. I've got some default MIDI tracks in there, so I'm going to delete those. But I'm going to first look at my keys. Okay, so similar to what we did before, what's our first key? Okay, D sharp. So we're going to go here and do D sharp, and I'm going to take this MIDI clip and just drop it right into my live set, and then we'll nudge it all the way over so it goes all the way at the beginning. Now I'm going to take my next key here, which is C sharp. So let's go find this guy, and we're going to drag this in. Okay, and we wanted the transition to happen right around here, so we'll do this. Okay, so we'll drop that in. And then next, let's go to our final key here, which is the key of F. And we're going to drop this clip in and we'll drop it right there. So that transition happens right about there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and delete this pad. You can see it's 20 minutes is running super, super long. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the end of this. But let me show you how this works. I'm going to turn our click on. And I'm going to solo just our click in our Pad Player for just a moment. And let's press play and listen to that. Okay, so I'll double click on Pad Player here. Now, what's really nice about Pad Player is by default, I have a filter, so I can open my filter up. I have 5 different sounds by default loaded in, so we could go to, for instance, sound 3, and we could press play, and that's a completely different pad sound than we had at the beginning. Again, this is going to loop infinitely over and over. I could add some motion to this where we have a little bit of movement to it instead of being just what it was by default. But one of my favorite things, I could increase the fade time, which I'm going to increase that quite a bit for these songs because we've transitions with keys. But what I really like about this is I could add an octave to this. I could add a fifth to this. If I know that it's going to work for what I'm doing, I could add a major third to this if I want to, but I'm going to leave that out for now. But now when I press play, then I could bring this down, take our octave out, bring our octave back in, take our fifth out. You can hear how much the fifth kind of adds to this. And I have individual control over each of these volumes. But then here's what's really cool about this. Yes, this is infinite. It's going to keep looping over and over. But what I like is, let's say we're about to head into a chorus of the song. We can open our filter up to add to that dynamic. So as I open this up, and then if we're going back to a lower section, then we can filter this back out. Right, we could get to a low section part of our song. Here's what's really nice about transitions though. I do not have to focus on my crossfade as much here. I just go to the end of my song. So let's jump there. Okay, we're gonna jump in. Let's open our filter up a little. And then we automatically hit our next key there. And we have that control over our fade so that fade happens based on what the fade time is. But we get a nice kind of subtle, gentle fade into our next song, which is great. And then we also have the ability to jump around in our arrangement with our Pad Player if we wanted to navigate our song. So we could jump all the way. Let's jump to our outro here. Okay, let's bring our tracks back in.
2, 3, 4.
Let's open our filter.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Again, we could
Intro,
filter out
2,
that
3,
if we wanted a
4.
little.
Drums.
So you could see we get a lot of dynamic, a lot of flexibility. We even have the ability just to go over and by default with playback stopped, or let's say we're going to start at the beginning of our set here. And we could just say, let's start in E flat. Let's just start that pad. We could solo our click just to have our click and pads going. Let's do that instead. Right. And we could just have this play as long as we wanted to. And then whenever we're ready, we could go back to our intro and we could disable back to arrangement view and just pick up right where we were in our song, which is really cool. So pad player is my particular way of doing pads. It's my favorite way of doing pads because it's dynamic, it's expressive, as opposed to just something that's just constant, that's never going to change, that's never going to change based on the dynamic of your song. I like using pad player to make that happen. As an added bonus, you could use a MIDI controller like the Presonus Atom or something with knobs or with faders so that you can assign that to your filter and to your sound, to your motion, to your fifth, your octave, and just really kind of play this as an instrument and change this and make it dynamic. You could even, if you're playing acoustic guitar using this by itself, you could add a expression pedal so that you could assign that and change this with your feet, which makes this really, really cool. So that's a look at using pad player to add drone pads and kind of help with our transitions in Ableton Live. Next, I want to talk about how to program your set to automatically stop, and then also how to have it stop and automatically go to our next song. But in order to see that, you've got to make sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell icon so you're notified as soon as we post our next video. Because in part 3 of this 5-part series, that's when we're going to dive into teaching Ableton Live to automatically stop and then also stop and select our next song. So make sure you're subscribed to see that. And we'll see you on the next video, 10 a.m. Central. Every single day we post new content, and I will see you in our next one. So stick around for part 3. Take care, everybody. Bye.